Every story you love, every invention that moves you, every idea you wished was yours, all began as nothing. Just a blank page with a blinking cursor, asking a simple question. What do you see? Great ideas start on Mac. Find out more on apple.com/Mac.
The detective said missing kids usually come home. What happens when they don't?
Based on a true story.
Police looking for John Gacy.
We discovered bodies. By the looks of it, they're younger men.
The things he did to those kids. He's sick.
The system failed these families.
Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Do you know how many there are?
Up to you to find out.
Welcome to Why We Roll, a tabletop role-playing game design podcast by the Stillfleet Studio. We're your hosts, Chris Pickett, creator of the historical fantasy game Dance Macabre, and Wythe Marshall, creator of the political sci-fi game Stillfleet. Through the show, we hope to amplify new creative voices. We chat with different indie TTRPG designers, talking through a range of questions that are pertinent to many designers, players, and GMs. We hope to showcase fresh and even challenging ideas about what makes imagination-based games so powerful. Before we introduce today's guest, a reminder. If you enjoy this episode, please consider supporting the show and all of our games over at patreon.com/Stillfleet. Okay, let's find out why we roll. All right, what's up, everybody? It is Why We Roll, the TTRPG podcast, sometimes stream. We're still figuring it out. We're going to get there. But as always, I am Chris Pickett, joined by my co-host, Wythe Marshall. We are also joined today by Josephine Kim and Fabian Lelay of Bad House RPG, an actual play multimedia empire.
Call it an empire.
I'm not sure about empire, but...
Well, how would you all describe it?
Well, now we have to describe it.
Yeah.
It is primarily a project between Fabian and I, where we decided we wanted to, as we were developing the voice, it is a Asian-led and fronted and designed and created all sorts of platform, network, hosting situation where not only we focus on the marginalized voices of our experiences, but we also get in very talented storytellers who from other experiences and other marginalized identities to also bring in their stories of horror and cinematic drama and things like that. Fabian designs all the quote unquote movie posters that we have for all of our shows. So however to condense that situation, I think multimedia is super appropriate because we're dipping into podcasting as well. Yeah, we're trying to do lots of stuff in 2025, so trying to do it all.
Amazing. And maybe y'all could just give us a sense of where you're each coming from as gamers, as creatives, before we ask, sort of deeper background stuff. So we have Fabian Lelay, Josephine Kim. Fabian, do you want to kind of kick us off? Introduce yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
My name is Fabian Lelay. Lelay. It doesn't really matter.
Apologies, Lelay.
No. The origin of the name is very unknown to most of me and my family. I know that it's French. It's whatever. Being Filipino, it's kind of weird. Spanish names and all. But I started gaming back in the Philippines around 2009, 2010s, where we had a group that just did a bunch of board games. And from there, that's when I realized there are more games, like tabletop games, RPGs and stuff like that. So I got into D&D, 4th edition, which I am in love with. Whoever says otherwise, you're wrong. And from there, as of late, I took a small break
from 2014 to around like 2019, or maybe like 2015, 2019. And I dove into more urban setting TTRPGs, so World of Darkness, you have Monster of the Week, stuff like that. And I fell in love with it. Just the possibility of telling different stories outside of like a fantasy, Western fantasy setting, really captivated me. So from there, we started Bad House with like a D&D podcast. Well, I started my streaming career with a D&D podcast and moved to focusing more on like these urban settings like World of Darkness, Monster Hearts, Kids on Bikes, stuff like that. So from there, I just chose to tell stories about my experiences and experiences of people that share my culture. So yeah.
Oh, that's super cool. Josephine, do you want to say a little about sort of your intro to gaming and where
My
you're at?
gamer
Yeah,
background.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. I got into D&D 5e in 2016, but I had been doing like play-by-post forum stuff ever since, you know, um, like well into high school and going into college, like getting really big into board games and card games and things like that. But the things that really stuck with me, and the thing that I really primarily call myself is in like intimate horror content creator. A lot of my original TikToks, which are like currently privated now, but maybe they'll resurface, were about like pregnancy in TTRPGs or how to tackle and handle menstruation, and relationships and like brothels and things like that. Things that really, I was really fascinated by these things that are so like personal to me, and personal to other people as well who experience these things. Um, and ever since I got my little hands on Bluebeard's Bride in 2022, I did not really let go. So that really dove me into this world of like wanting to continue to introduce historical and political content um, into my work. And intimate horror specifically is the horror of the mundane relationships that we have in our day to day, and that is not specifically like our like significant others. That is like these are our intimate relationships with other people, as far as like our friends and family goes as well. So I've just always been fascinated by the relationship aspect, and like backgrounds and history and things like that. Um, yeah, and I started streaming in 2021 with, of course, D&D in a like a Peter Pan Neverland sort of setting, and then kind of diving off from there. I still dip my toes into fantasy, but with Bad House RPG again, there's primarily this like urban fantasy thing that we are doing.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, that is so different from what you see a lot of actual plays doing. I mean, I think wife and I were talking the other day, like, we know some folks that do some like Western setting stuff, even though it's like a little bit apolitical. But yeah, I mean, you don't see a lot of the like kind of modern and, in your words, intimate horror making its way into that style of play. I don't know if you would call actual play a genre. It feels like a container for many different genres. Yeah, medium. There you go.
It's
Yeah,
like a medium.
Marshall
It's
McLuhan for
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, it's more
I
of a
like
medium
that.
for sure.
So how did the two of you find each other? How did you get together and kind of start up Bad House?
Oh, so when I started a different channel in 2021, I found myself surrounded by a lot of like very supportive and wonderful white creators. My background primarily was in comics, and these were also other comic book artists. And they gave me more of like their support in like finding more of an actual play or like a story that I could call my own and feel like I'm more comfortable. So within the setting that we created for our original game, um, I thought of creating like an Asian inspired, post-colonial Asian inspired setting. I put out a call. Josephine, actually, I was aware of already through TikTok. through their like insightful political and at the same time like TTRPG like thoughts as they would make videos, like makeup videos while talking about like these themes. And they were very insightful, and as soon as I saw them on the pretty much the application sheet, I was like, I want to play with them. So we were able to create this group of other people. We had Saf, who is a TTRPG apparel business owner. We have a comedian who was a friend of mine, Luke. We had Stella Luna, who is amazing what they do for the community. Then we had Toffee, who is also an actor based out of the West Coast, and then we had Joe. And basically creating that ecosystem of like us being able to play with an all Asian table. We kind of we went from there, and then after that whole Asian inspired fantasy game was done, Josephine approached me, and at the time I was doing also a Vampire the Masquerade show set in New York, and they were like, I would love to do something in Itaewon, which Joe, you could definitely. I think you're best to talk about this
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
So I think the really beginning imaginings of Bad House RPG started with Itaewon by Night, which is an all Asian table of Vampire the Masquerade, and perhaps the first table. Was the first table that was all Asian streaming, and it was an all Korean cast. We had one Korean cast member alongside me, Jen Mack or Youngles, and then we had Hamna Shahid, a Pakistani streamer. We had Nala Wu, Southern Chinese, and we had Fabian. So we also had a Filipino. We had just like a broad range of Asian identities, because the whole point about Itaewon specifically is that it is homo central. Like it's like the gay neighborhood of Seoul, but it's as well as the international district. It is a Korea works in like neighborhoods and districts, like in roads and streets. Obviously, like lots of places do, but like the specific naming convention of Itaewon is like kind of specific. So although the dealings, mishandlings of business and so on happened all throughout Seoul, Itaewon is like the primary place of like party life and drama and chaos that housed Itaewon by Night. And I was like, I really want I want a Korean story. I have not been getting the like K-drama kind of AP stuff that I want out of this space. And what we were really able to do at the same time is that Jen Mac's background involved a lot of like the Korean military and the American military. And there was a specific instance in Gwangju in Korea in the 80s where a dictatorship was attempting to make its way through, and it was very, very, very much it was happening actively, and we're seeing a lot of that potential dictatorship attempt to happen in 2024, like as we speak. So many of the themes that we got into in Itaewon, including American exceptionalism, and the aftershocks and waves of occupation, there was just so much that I wanted to do, and thus like we had 2 seasons of it, and it was a glorious project that we have then continued into a further World of Darkness universe called Darkness Eternal.
And I think one of the biggest things, just like Josephine said, we really want to reflect things because so many things in media reflect our political standings and political climates. And the thing is, what America's experiencing right now is something that has happened over and over in other countries, whether it is based on what America's done to that country or has brought to that country. Like honestly, what's happening right now, us having convicted of like felonies in office, has happened to the Philippines multiple times. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to showcase like these are the things that will happen, and these are the things that can happen if we keep, you know, being blind to certain things that are in front of us at the moment. So, you know, we approach storytelling with Bad House with intentionality and purpose, so that people not only get entertained but also learn something about themselves and the world around them.
Oh, I love that so much. It's reminding me a lot of there's a short book called A Billion Black Anthropocenes or None by Catherine Yusuf, which she makes a similar argument to what you just said, Fabian, which is that like, you know, we in the West we're now talking about the Anthropocene as this kind of like end of history, end of time situation where we've destroyed the planet, but there have already been a billion Anthropocenes. It's just that we are now experiencing them in our geographic location. So yeah, I love centering that in the story and being like, look, it's already happened. It can happen again. It can happen here and now.
Yeah, and that's why we started a company, was to have at least one that we knew of RPG company that was explicitly trying to connect, you know, politics and games. So there is an element of escapism and fun, and I think for listeners of AP, that's fun. But I think there's a way in which these stories can play such a deeper role. And you already brought up so much. I have like a million questions, you know, in terms of all the things like Josephine you were saying about like just basic issues around like, I don't know, having a uterus or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then you get into like you're talking about, you know, specific moments in Korea's history as essentially sort of neo-colony of the United States. I was just listening to season 3 of Blowback, which is about the Korean War, and I mean, it's just like any one of these slices of time, you could actually tell some really amazing stories, and maybe even some, I don't know, thought could go into like, I guess my question that I'm leading toward is like, what kinds of stories do you end up telling? Not to, you know, maybe you want to worry about spoilers. I don't know. That's up to you. But like, I'm curious to hear how dark or how kind of recuperative or healing, or like, did you get to places where people were able to share ways to sort of, you know, lay in the cut and sort of survive through the tragedy a little, or through the you know, the violence of politics. Like, I think there's a lot there that's generative. And to Fabian, what you're saying, I think would speak to more and more people in the United States. You know, for better for worse, like they're going to be thinking these things maybe for the first time. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear how you've already explored that in your shows. Yeah.
The main thing with E2 on My Night, for example, is that we wanted to showcase that vampirism, as we know it, Western vampirism, the big bad metaphor was that it is colonization, it is occupation. Um, Vampirism came from Japan and America into South Korea. Like the whole reason, the kind of reason that I wanted to put focus on that is because South Korea has like no vampire folk stories, or like, you know, in Japan there's like Kyuketsuki whatever, and then America there we have vampires. But in South Korea there are undead things, but like for the most part vampires, like the concept of like sucking blood and like the like whole romanticization um other like thereafter is not really something that exists really in Korea. And if I even wanted to find more information about vampires that have really existed in South Korea, a lot of that has been specifically destroyed and taken over by the Japanese during the multiple generations that they have attempted to annex and assimilate Korea inside of them, right? Um, the stories that I want to tell are just that. Like it when you can make a wide sweeping sort of thing of like vampirism as colonization, it is the only reason that South Korea has vampires, and thus South Korean vampires and Ichewon who, you know, benefit from vampirism, for example, then leads to this whole other thing of the capitalism in South Korea and the chaebol system, which is like the really really rich families that like only kind of like cannibalize other corporations and like feed it back into like the family. And the big bad of season 1 is like basically the head of one of these families who basically just like put all chaos out there in order for her to like kind of take it all back for herself sort of concept. Um classic, little old lady who would know. And on top of we have colonialism and capitalism, also the like very confusing power dynamics and like uh the confusing power dynamics that being a vampire and being dead or alive can provide, like this sense of loyalty that um being undead kind of unearths out of you. Like Fabian and Hamna's character had a whole conflict in between both seasons of like, do you love me or is it the bite? Like that uh the way that turned into like a whole like sense of like character turmoil for the two of them for like the entire both seasons was just so wonderful for me. But like loyalty at the same time, like uh stories like these, like it's just all so wonderful for me in particular.
Yeah, and for me, it's pretty similar. A lot of the stories that I tell is stories about people overcoming adversity through colonization or oppression. We had one of our other Asian settings was Madness Over Manila, which vampirism in the Philippines was brought on by the Spanish. So you would you would see how the oppression of Catholicism and how colonialism has put down the locals, and how they had their own source of vampirism, and it has been tainted and it was seen as dirty or inferior. So having characters triumph over that was something important to me. And there was also like, just like Josephine had enjoyment in their story, I had enjoyment when they played in Madness Over Manila as a missionary, an old missionary who was a vampire that broke their chains from being this a prospect by like the Catholic Church into kind of grooming them into their own kind of um I would say kind of just as a victim for
Yeah.
what they wanted to do. Currently, right now, Midnight Rush is about the oppression of the current state of economy and what rich people would do to exploit the poor. So yeah.
I think too, because forgetting the whole other half of your question after relisting everything about Itaewon by Night, but we live in it. Like I think Fabian and I are the type of people who like can't play Wander Home. You know what I mean? Like you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I know exactly what you mean.
Like a
Yeah.
world without violence is not one that we understand. And like where violence comes from is where the power comes from, and like from there, like the ways that we enact violence on each other are also the ways that we enact certain types of power against each other at the same time. And like there's just not gonna be, in my brain anyway, like a separation of like, if there is someone who is saying that they are a leader of some sort, then like what are the specific systems that they are putting into place? Like we want to tell these types of stories.
Yeah, and as fair as it is for other channels, like one of our friends, like some of our friends over at Transplaner are doing an amazing job telling stories of the idealist world where colonization wasn't a thing. I think there is a place for that. And there's also a place for people to take what they have and take their experiences and their trauma and the damage that the world has done to them, and create something for people to see and learn and revolt against. So that's
Yeah.
what we do mostly in Bad House.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something really powerful about
acknowledging real politic, but then I think, like you're saying, Fabian, trying to give people agency within that. So, whether it's overcoming adversity or finding a voice within
Yeah.
systems of oppression, within systems of violence, there is something really, really powerful about that, narratively, but also just as a listener too. That's something that's really intriguing.
Yeah. And maybe we can move to have some game designy questions, Chris. You may as well. But
Yeah.
it makes me think of just narrative structure in design. Like, do you have a sort of game loop at the level of narrative, and how that ties into sort of genre and setting and building a character? What kind of person are you? I remember as a kid, Vampire was the second or the third game I played. I guess I played D&D and Call of Cthulhu, like D&D 2E and old Call of Cthulhu. And then I discovered the World of Darkness and got really into it for a number of reasons. I thought the mechanics were better, but I also really genuinely liked that they emphasized you're not just fighting stuff. Like, you might have conflicts with other players. And I mean, again, it's like a 12 or 13-year-old. And D&D, it was not played that way by my GM, my older brother, who's 6 years older. He played it more as about exploration, but just the books were very much about fighting stuff. So it seemed very obvious that, okay, this whole genre is just sort of video games, but not as cool looking. But then, Vampire opened me up to that world. And I wonder about the narrative structures that you're getting into and talking about. Because I was just thinking about like other tales that find some way to think about processes of colonization, because they're not like, it's not like a one-off thing. It's like a long-term, it's a forever thing. And it's like Fanon talks about, like, it sort of changes both sides. I was just thinking the goofiest example from the summer was we went to the Asian Film Festival at Lincoln Center and watched a movie called Operation Undead, which is like the big Thai blockbuster zombie movie of the year. And it was really weird because it's really not much of a horror movie. It's more philosophical, but it's based on a real thing, which is the Japanese came to Thailand and basically told the king and the generals, we're going to invade unless you let us just go pass through. And so they did, and they were sort of complicit. So it's a movie about being complicit. And in the movie, just to what you're saying, they brought zombies as a weapon of war, and accidentally one gets out, infects a bunch of Thai soldiers. It's told from their perspective. So they're the good guys. They're also zombies. And in a weird way, it stops being about fighting and starts being about, it's almost like funny in the way Shaun of the Dead, they're kind of hanging out in caves in the woods, and they're like, whoa. And it's kind of a movie about like community making in a new form of life. And I think that's, it touches on some of those ideas about, like, as a vampire, the different social bonds you form and the different ways you break those bonds or reform them. But I like that you're tying it to these major real world things that would affect, humans, vampires, whatever, insert whatever sort of fantasy in the broad sense of like not real supernatural trope. So that's not really a question, but I guess my question is about narrative structure and just systems. Like, how do you think about, so I take it you're working with World of Darkness. I think, Fabian, if I'm recalling correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, from our conversation, you've made some adaptations, maybe both of you or your whole team. So I'm just personally curious to hear sort of how the big books and the game itself affects your version of AP and storytelling.
Yeah. I think, so in terms of like the books and like game systems, the way that we think of is, it's funny because like we think of the concept of the show first. What do we want to do? And then later on, once we figure that out, we figure out what system it's going to be good at. So like, well, we do a lot of World of Darkness, but at the same time, we do other systems as well. We did, I believe, Alyssa, who is a GM that we had over at Bad House, wanted to do a very pointed commentary on housing crisis and like how the place that you live in isn't just a privilege, it is a right. So they dove into Spire and they were able to use that system. But as for like World of Darkness, the way that we change it is, the thing is, World of Darkness has been created years ago through the lens of like Westerners only knowing Western forms of vampirism. In Madness Over Manila, I thought of changing a lot of things because we have a lot of folklore that is very vampiric, but is not the glitz and glamour style of, it's not like Interview with a Vampire where seduction is the main thing. Everything is through subterfuge and through curses and through black magic. Vampires are monsters that take form of humans to let your guard down, and that's when they strike. So we took the system as a guideline and created like basically pick and chose the certain aspects of Filipino vampires that we know in folklore that work, and just from there created our own lore in a world building sense. So I feel like, to your question, we use a lot of strong framework with the books that we use, but at the very end of the day, we do the rule of cool and see what works thematically, what's cooler, and what kind of gets our point across the best way possible.
Yeah.
From yeah, like for Midnight Rush, everybody started with as civilians, no hunter abilities. Like this is a Hunter the Reckoning game where I severely nerfed them, but had uh safety nets in place to make sure that they get through the story to upon when they skip time and they can be like established actual hunters, that it feels more natural.
Yeah, I love that. I'm
Pretty
curious, have
much, yeah.
y'all had to, I mean, I'm assuming, Fabian, I'm assuming you've GM'd some, Joe, you've GM'd some. I'm curious too, like within the World of Darkness games, have you had moments where you've needed to be like, oh, mechanically this has to change because it doesn't work narratively for what we're doing? And maybe that's like some of the safety nets you're speaking to, but I'm kind of curious how you set that up.
Yeah. Not so much like safety nets in terms of like mechanics and like us dying through the game or anything like that, but like one thing in particular is that we changed how Thin Bloods and Caitiff are
Mhm.
perceived. Not necessarily so much how they work. But Fabian, in terms of game design, had created like a really fantastic, amazing, um, like new formula recipes for some of the Thin Blood formulas to
Yeah.
cater to like more
Mhm.
Asian, like related folklore and like
Yeah.
just stuff, you know,
Culturally too, yeah.
culturally. I, just as an example, like vampires can't eat, they can't digest food. It has to like there are the advantages that like help them eat the food, but then it has to be expelled. Fabian made a thin blood formula that allows vampires to be able to digest the food and taste the food.
Yes.
Because any vampire that's Asian was gonna miss the food the most.
Well,
You know,
that and at the same time, the best way to meet people, especially in South Korea, is through eating and drinking. And if you're gonna lure prey to your place, to another place, it is through that social interaction.
most drinking, you're eating at the same time in Korea. But with the thin blood and caitiff thing, we we were worried about blood quantum conversations. Like we didn't even want to touch really like how much whatever is your generation, and we decided that it really just depended on like how you wanted to go about playing, but we would put the two together, this concept of clanless vampires, um the concept of like not being part of like the original 13 by any
Mhm.
means, not being something understood, not being something whatever. As in Korea, thin bloods and caitiffs are called, or specifically categorized as orphans. Like these, um, and that's very like severe Asian like translation stuff. That's really funny to us. It's just like, of course, they would just be called orphans. Like these are, the quote unquote children that didn't come from the greater lines, that sort of thing. And that we didn't want it to be like, oh, if you were a fledgling vampire and you tried to sire, they would end up a thin blood. We just wanted it to be that like anyone could sire you and you could end up a caitiff or thin blood for whatever reason.
Yeah, more
Um,
like a mutation of sort, kind of like cancer of sorts. It just happens, right?
Yeah,
But
and the
yeah,
idea of blood being it's like trying to get away from that idea that there's pure or particularly
yeah,
good
right.
or whatever blood, and instead, allow characters to kind of have this range of they can have association or familiarity, but it's not like pureness would be good or better, or even maybe there's even a degree to which it's not real, just like a lot of the problem with people's like colloquial understanding of like the science of human difference is often they think that these things are like very reified genetically in a way that they're just not. They're like you can't find it, like the Mexican government famously spent all this money trying to find the genes for mestizaje, but it's like, it makes no sense because you're talking about 100 different indigenous peoples and a lot of people from all over the world brought by the Spanish who now live together and are a people, but there are people due to language, culture, food, all these things. So it's interesting to think how that plays out in a game about like literally you're a vampire and you turn other people to vampire, so it's like a metaphor, but I could see how that would lead to some real weird conversations if you, yeah, real quick.
So, instead of that, we just decided, in South Korea, there's a lot of cults, a lot of religious cults as well. So one of the things that carries over as a theme that really like makes Thin Bloods and Caitiffs very important, like these orphans, is that there isn't a belief that they are going to cause the end of the world, or that they are going to cause the end of all vampire life, because no one understands where they come from, and it's very similar to like what you're saying about like certain governments trying to understand things that just happen, or like are just so widespread at this point that like what is the point, like why not just try and work your way into understanding them. And like Thin Bloods and Caitiffs sort of to the side as well, like narrative structure wise, like all the way through the entire story, the police are bad guys. Like we do not go out of our way to make any of the police like, competent or whatever. We Throughout the entire way, the police in the Itaewon by night setting, all or most of them had some kind of alignment with a privatized military that was owned by like, again, this greater family of the police, that was within the district. So just kind of again aligning our morals even within the story. We talk about undocumented immigrants and things like that in Jen's story with her character Wendy, and Wendy in particular being, Wendy's a just like Jen, I believe. Wendy is a like half white American and half Korean character who went through like orphanage systems and like adoption systems, as well as uh, kicking ass in like trafficking circles and rings like that. So we just didn't, we didn't shy away from these things that are just so very real and present. The first episode, we make a joke about North Korea. So, just
There's also, we try to create like a lot of our lore is definitely heavily based on like um cultural stories from our backgrounds that would only make sense. For instance, in Madness Over Manila, caitiffs were not only just things that just happen, but a lot of the older caitiffs are evidence that how the original 13 in Vampire the Masquerade believed that Cain was, the progenitor of vampirism, or Lilith, depending on like what sect they fall under or believe in. We had a different progenitor, which is Mayari, which is the goddess of the moon, who gave each supernatural creature their own abilities of what they want to do. So all these caitiffs believe that they are children of Mayari and that they are there to be the antithesis of like creatures of light, of creatures that thrive in good. And it's not that they are evil, it is just that they need to feed, and whether they use it in a benevolent way, that's up to them. So yeah, at the end of the day, we basically take a lot of the lore and see what we can twist to present something new and exciting for people like us who oftentimes are turned off from playing Vampire the Masquerade because of experiences with either GMs who don't know better, or who don't understand that there are cultures outside of the West that may not have been consulted in the earlier iterations of the game.
So that leads to another question. So I mean, I have a lot of questions and thoughts, but just for listeners who may not, have listened to your shows yet, I think we also heard, correct me if I'm wrong, you have some game design work that you're also doing. It's this part of the multimedia bad house. Maybe the empire is the wrong word.
Yes,
it sounds bad, but multimedia effort. So I don't know if that will bridge nicely from what we were just talking about, or feels like a hard left turn. But I am genuinely curious, again, kind of extending on the system thing and
the
narrative structure thing. Yeah, like how do you go? I guess it's sort of related. Like, how do you develop and produce AP? How do you develop game products, and what are some learnings that you've had when you're thinking about it, in a way, like, not that that's the only thing it's doing, is probably a minimal thing in a way, but being a corrective, right, to some of the stuff, at least, that World of Darkness has put out that you feel wasn't great.
I think the perfect thing to bring up as an example is our show Ashes of New Amsterdam. So Ashes of New Amsterdam is our mage game. The thing about mage is it is a very fun game, very interesting system, but it is heavily rooted in cultural appropriation without the understanding of the cultures that are being appropriated of. A lot of it pulls from West Asian, South Asian cultures that are basically turned into stereotypical kind of spiritual mumbo jumbo that they think, oh, this is a good tradition. So what we did as a game design approach is we scrapped everything. For a world building narrative, everybody got dissolved through a war that was presented back in the 90s. The technocracy is a great addition, as not only as an antagonist but also a natural progression. As the technocracy, if not a lot of people aren't aware, is a sect of mages that use technology and believe that technology is the next step of evolution of magic, like the internet, like like the Hadron Collider is just a machine that creates magic. And because of like the source of magic, source of everything supernatural in the world revolting around the problems of what technology brings, which is like global warming, the destruction of our own home, magic has decided to fight back and create new mages from people that are just everyday people out of random, but we're starting to create more natural ways of having magic into the setting. So we designed the mage system to kind of convert into V5, where you start from the ground up, where you learn about magic and you create. So it's still honestly a work in progress, even though that we've played it before on stream, where we take aspects that relate to mages and make it similar to how vampire or werewolf or hunter works, where quintessence is something that is a form of magic that you can harness, that you can pretty much get naturally, and it is something produced from your own magical ability and your being. Arete being is something just like your blood potence of like your mastery of magic, and each school of magic being a thing that you've studied. So a lot of our design choices fall down to making it neutral, understanding the cultural impacts of the design choices, and making sure that it is well included in the realms of reality, that it makes sense to exist in the setting.
It's the Smucker's Uncrustables podcast with your host, Uncrustables.
Okay, today's guest is rough around the edges. Please welcome Crust.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic, he's round with soft, pillowy bread.
Hey.
Filled with delicious PB&J.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you can take him anywhere.
Why'd you invite?
And we are out of time.
Are you really cutting me off?
Uncrustables are the best part of the sandwich. Sorry, Crust.
Enjoying the show? Please consider supporting Why We Roll in all of our games over at patreon.com/Stillfleet. Dear patrons, we really love y'all. We just couldn't keep making Why We Roll without your support. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Now back to the show.
Nice. So it sounds like a lot of it. So it feels like you keep going back to kind of almost like lore first, and like this almost mission on the kinds of story you're telling, and letting that sort of determine a lot of the mechanical pieces. But it also sounds like you're working fairly within the sort of apocalypse system. I don't even know what it's called now. I should know this, but the World of Darkness.
I think it's the storyteller system.
Storytellers. That's it. I knew that. Yeah. Storyteller. That sounds good. That's a nice name. Remember when it was all about like the end of the world or so? I don't know. Yeah, they've gone through so many editions. It's like it's changed on and off. But it sounds like you're working mostly there. Although it does sound like you're familiar with tons of other systems. So I don't know how much of that is like, continuity for listeners of your actual play, so they know that sort of they know a little bit of what they're going to get in advance, or it's a more familiar system. Yeah.
I mean, there's part of it where the little sprinklings of mentions of like the 13 clans in Itaewon by Night is, it's like that the little reelings of the thing that people get from Vampire the Masquerade. Like what they are not going to get are the like specific Korean factions that were like built into Itaewon by Night based around the interests of the players, as well as just like, the things that I was cooking in my head. But again, like you're saying, like lore first and then kind of building mechanics where they need to be is again this intentionality of it all. We even going into like, again, Fabian and Hamna's characters having this conversation of like, is it love or is it the bite? The wording in the particular move or discipline action that it is the verbiage is very much about like addiction to a person, and some of us have certain relationships to addiction, but not into the effect that like it would come to like not in the way that like matters to our story, so like why bring it up, and like if we wanted to bring it up, like it should have been a whole other conversation that then should have happened. Like if it's not going to be an addiction story, like why in the middle of everything is there just addiction? So yeah, just like intentionality, putting the pieces that need to be put in, like not worrying about certain mechanics if they're really not even going to show up. And it doesn't help like in season 1, a lot of us, I think Fabian was the one who had been like regularly playing Vampire the Masquerade V5 at the time, and then the rest of us were still very much like holding on to like the multiple documents that I made. But yeah, like just shout out to Fabian, primary designer, I should really put focus on and say. Yeah, we're hoping to do some more mage stuff too, and it's going to be very exciting. Hopefully some changeling stuff too, but that's like a whole other thing because it's from 2E.
And another thing that we also did, like going back to Itaewon, was designing the new Thin Blood formulas, because again, like everything needs to be cultural, but also at the same time we want to make people who are big fans of like older editions familiar with what these things do. And like there is an interesting way of going about it through looking through time and like the memories of the blood, and kind of creating what is potential. So we created for True Bruja, like fans, we created a formula for Temporis, something that a lot of Dark Ages fans would probably be interested in, which is basically stopping time, and we do lore first, but also at the same time, we want to see what would be fun, what would be interesting, what would narratively make sense for the character to create.
Well, it's interesting too that you would bring up like fans of the older editions of World of Darkness as well. Like that feels like a kind of constant negotiation that we have to have within TTRPGs in general. But I imagine in actual play too, because you want to have these landmarks, these kind of like things that people can grasp onto, while also having the corrective, while also telling new stories with it at the same time.
Because I feel like actual plays in general, the biggest issue is that there are people out there that really see editions as our edition is better than yours, instead of, hey, what is better? Like, what did you improve upon, and why do you like this one? And instead of it being a conversation, it becomes us versus them, and it kind of breaks the idea of community. And I feel like based on our experiences being people of color, we already understand how the experiences of the white audiences have. We just want people to see our perspective. Obviously, we're not going to force people. Like, if you don't like it, hey, don't like it. But it's in front of you now, and if you find it interesting and you want to learn more, then please join us. Sit down, watch what we're creating, and feel free to ask us, what do we think about this and this, and why do we think it's so important for us to have these things.
Yeah, and I think that's like a good AP in general, and you're getting it really good AP where it has this added like philosophical like real talk dimension. But I think in general, good storytelling, you don't want to be rules lawyering every role as a listener. Like if you're thinking about would they really have gotten 2 successes there? So like I think to cast Tempestio they would need 3 or whatever, and it's like that means you're not really paying attention to like the story and caring about the characters and what they're up to. So I think it sounds like you're caring about bigger social things and then also trying to do the good job of storytelling. And so exactly what edition and how you've tweaked it. Like I imagine some of the tweaks are interesting and those you do want to highlight and talk about, but a lot of this stuff is just in the background of like, yeah, if it works, we kept it or whatever. You may not have told the listener all of the things. Maybe you publish separate articles. I mean, I don't know, you could tell us. But this gets a little at another question that I had, which is just really advice. We mostly focus on game design, among other indie writers and, publishers. But we like AP, listen to it a little. And so I think, it'd be interesting just to ask, like you touched on some, it sounds like best practices, but maybe there's others or other ways you want to formulate it. If people are making shows where they're using RPGs to tell collective stories, what are some things that come to your head, or what are some learnings, any way you want to take that question, anything fun you want to say?
I think like my quick answer to that, short answer, there's always a game out there for your story other than D&D.
Preach.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was like the 100.
Yes.
The first thing is you don't need to reach for D&D. God, yeah. I think if you gotta read. I don't like you gotta you gotta get the bundles, annotate the books, look at the rules, look at like really focus on things. I think collaborations with designers are so fruitful and so amazing if you really sit down and you go through the mechanics that you want to be like that you want to like really spotlight in the moment. Like in another podcast that I have called Someplace to Be, we worked very closely with the designer Jonathan Lavallee for We Used to Be Friends, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game where it would be like hot, cold, volatile, and dark, whatever. Instead of those being the only stats, you also had like 6 other stats that you can actually manually put into how you would solve that problem in different ways. So like, how do you use hot? Do you use your body? Do you use your eyes? Do you use like brute force or something along those lines? And we specifically, as an all like asexual, as a majority asexual cast, um, the seduction aspect or like the flirting aspect of that game, um, we really wanted to hone in terms of like how our characters built relationships. Like, do they seduce with their body? Do they seduce with their mind or something along those lines? Do they not seduce? You know, um, like reading developer logs and stuff like that. Like, what else? You know, it just feels like it feels like common sense almost, but I feel like we do gravitate towards what is the more glamorous title at the moment sometimes. And like it can be fine, but like then you got to make sure that you really wrap your head around like what type of story fits best into the system. What is the system? And then what do you actually want to tell? Because there's merit to jamming, I don't know, D&D and Good Society together. But like, or you could play a game that is maybe all of those things rather than, you know, whatever. Like,
It's also, I think, another question that could be asked is like, why is this system the hotness right now? And like, what stories are being told with it? Or like, you know, what stories are facilitating it being popular at the moment? And are those the same kind of stories that we want to tell?
I feel like oh no, what I was just gonna say is like if you wanted to get into APs, like anybody out there listening to this, watching this right now, if you wanted to go to APs, the market is so saturated, and it's not that you can't tell your story. It's a matter of like, why are you telling this story? What is this story that you're trying to tell, and what are you trying to make? What are you hoping that people feel after they watch this or they listen to this or they just consume it? Whether you're doing a like for solo journaling, if people are going to read your journal, what do you want them to take away from it? So it is very important and imperative that you know the space that you're in. Whether read about, listen to, watch other APs from other people that are very talented or you look up to, then yeah, like you should do that because again, the market is so saturated that do you really want to do like how many end of the world scenarios in a fantasy world do we need, and like what is setting you apart? Might as well just play it with your friends and save yourself the trouble of like producing a show that is very thankless and very expensive to do. Um, you know, it sounds very gatekeepy, but like it's not the intention. It's the intention
No.
is think more on what kind of story, because at the end of the day, your experiences have merit, and you should probably look towards that in creating your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if the intention is intention, then it can only be a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like maybe like we're moving into a world. Well, first of all, the glib response I had when you said, you know, fantasy apocalypse was I remember as a child, Final Fantasy was a very popular title. There were debates about you know, we'd go to Blockbuster and we'd read in a magazine that number 3 was actually number 6 or something. Anyway, my whole thought was, you keep saying final. It's not final. It keeps fucking happening. You guys keep blowing up the fucking world every like year. There's a new version. So anyway, I think that is actually a problem in speculative genre. You know, speculative genres in general tend toward these often extremely epic stories, and I think you've seen this pushback or correction, which maybe is an overcorrection, but you know, with cozy games and stuff more recently, where people are looking at other kinds of structures. But setting aside all that, I also wonder if we're moving toward a place where people are admitting that, like, if everyone is doing AP, then, you know, what does that say about like the sort of deeper desire? Like, everyone clearly likes these games, wants to play these games, is open to sort of trading stories and storytelling, but maybe, in an ideal world, it wouldn't be a job in the sense that none of us would have to worry so much about like, do I have housing? Do I have food? Do I have healthcare? And maybe storytelling would take on more of the character of a sort of pre-modern, like, society where storytelling had all these different functions for society in terms of bringing people together and transmitting information and history and building groups. And maybe AP in its own weird way, I was just a wild speculation, but is kind of a lot of smart people heading in this direction where it's almost like, I'm sure everyone wants to be listened to. Everyone has a little bit of that ego, right? At least a little bit. But, it's also a lot of people I think are doing it anyway. And they're just like, you know what? I am going to record me and my friends playing. I hear you there, Fabian. I agree on the intention part, but I wonder if, like, in addition to intention, it's just a signal that everyone wants to perform or be allowed to tell their story. And that could be a good thing. I think, again, paired with intention, paired with some point. So it's not just all sort of, narcissistic, right? Like,
like the advice of pairing it with intentions is just for you to stand out. If you don't care about standing out, then by all means do it. Like, we do it on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Blue Sky, all the social media outlets. You go to YouTube right now, and there are probably 100,000 channels out there talking about Magic the Gathering and doing the same format. Somebody's gonna watch you, sure, but like, definitely the top 10 are doing something much different for them to garner that attention. If you want that attention, then like, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who go into APs want their stories to be heard. If you want it to be heard, then you should definitely think about what you're going to do, whether the message is different or if the message is the same. How are you executing it, right? One of our biggest one of our favorite friends who does APs, Tales Yet Told, they do, like, a lot of people can easily play Babes in the Wood or Void. Was it like the 1084 or something?
1680.
1680. But the way that they present these games are so different that it forces you to pay attention. So like, that's the advice. Like, this is in general advice. Like, if you're going to do the same story or a similar story, no one's going to stop you there. But if you want that attention, then you have to demand it.
Yeah, what are you adding? Like, what's different that isn't
Exactly.
Yet another iteration of received genre? Even to your point about 1680, whatever the full name of the game is, the radio game, right? It's like,
Yes.
once you've played it once, it's so distinct. Weirdly enough, it's such a specific narrative structure that if you heard one time it done well, the question would be,
Right.
do I need to hear it again? Like, I enjoyed it,
Yeah.
It's because it's sort of like, to me, Honey Heist falls into that. A lot of good RPGs that have hyper specific narratives where they're really fun once, but you can't possibly imagine like the campaign version where you're like, okay, you're still there, you're at a different convention,
Exactly.
But that's where, again, that thought, that intention can come into play. Any advice on the business side? You mentioned money. Not to pry, but like, how does it work? Like, what is your goal, or any way you want to take that? Again, we're supporters and we will not pry any further than you want. But any advice or sort of, how did you come together as a collective, or anything that you can sort of share about the landscape there? I don't know.
I think on my end, at the very least, going into this thinking that you're going to make a lot of money is like a really bad idea. This is something, like, this is a community, an industry fueled by passion and sheer determination. Money is going to come when it comes, but again, going back to intentionality and being different, if you want that attention, you have to show that you're worth it. Because unfortunately, with everything that's happening right now, even companies are having a hard time shelling out money so they can sponsor like shows, and for you to be able to fall under like these channels that are even considered, you have to do something different. You also have to understand that, again, at the very end, it falls down to community. your community is what you create your stories for, not only yourself. It might not be a lot, but the community will support something if they have faith in it. So
And I mean, like, let's Fabian, the two of us, we can talk about like what specifically our roles are and like what we do
exactly, yeah.
as well. So really quick, did you want to talk about what you do kind of behind the scenes and all the otherwise?
Yeah, so what I do behind the scenes is depending on what show it is, or who's running the show, I create all the visuals for the show, from the overlays, from the promotional materials, from the character art, from the just from the very minute detail of whatever you see. Most of the time, I worked on it. Um, that also includes things that you don't see, which is proposals. So when it comes to proposals, making sure that the things are pretty and very inviting to read and exciting to read. Um, this is important when it comes to going into APs, because you want to pitch something to a company. Um, you have to build a pitch docket. Make sure that they know what the show is going to look like, or at least what the vibe is. So I set the mood. And Joe, you want to talk about what you do?
So I'm majorly one of the like usual things that I'm credited for is safety coordinator, as well as like all the other production roles that I do. So very specifically, I create all of the like templates as far as if we get a GM that has a pitch, like creating the like document that they have to fill out for that. Um, whenever a GM has applications or like wants an open casting call, I provide that. I provide that template, create all of those things. I collect the information that then needs to go to Fabian in like a nice organized little pile, um, to become these pitch decks. Um, we go back and forth between like emailing responsibilities, and Fabian very thankfully has been the one in contact with our major sponsors. So we've worked alongside like Hero Forge, I think the most, and that connect thankfully. And this kind of has to do with an access thing, as well as that Fabian and I are fortunate enough to go to conventions as well. And at conventions, you can meet people for the first time that are just like online faces, and then talk a little bit more, exchange business cards, very businessy stuff. But at the same time, just like meeting people for the first time and being like, yes, I want to work with this person. They have a fantastic work ethic. They have a fantastic, I don't know, like work life balance vibe that makes me want to be their friend outside of everything. Like, um, being able to like see each other is, I think, it's it's important, but at the same time it's unfortunate when like you're just unable to like be at a con. Like, what are you supposed to do then? And in that kind of unfortunate thing, like continuing to spread other of our marginalized friends voices and their platforms, and making sure that like one of the GMs that we are featuring in January is someone who will not be able to storytell for a very long time after this game. And they are such a talented, like, one of the performers, one of the many performers in this space who like went to school for acting. Um, so just that all to say, I went all over the place, but being able to network and being able to meet people, being able to, uh, be willing to go to like booths and see people's panels and things like that is, also very important, and establishes some type of relationship. Um, so yeah, do a lot of the like paperwork, administrative type stuff, and the data collection of it all. And also just keeping tabs of like performers that like we are interested in and like want to see onto the channel at some point. Um, And I think Fabian, the reason that it's just the two of us is just that like we're both insane crazy people who don't sleep. And like our lifestyles thankfully are just similar. We're both on the East Coast and we see each other fairly often. That is obviously going to be very helpful compared to like a team that spans the entire world, and is maybe like, you know, over 10 people or something along those lines. Like, you know, sometimes the smaller collaborations really do work out the best. And then just from there, hopefully we outsource whatever we can't manage. um, Games are better than sleep, that's for sure. Yeah, I don't know, Fabian, if there's any other businessy related stuff.
I mean, I think focusing on like smaller the group, the better. But at the same time, try to diversify your experiences. Diverse casts do really well because they tell the most interesting stories. You'll be surprised. Somebody with a different background do a very surprisingly shocking thing that you never expected as a GM, and it drives the story towards something that you don't expect, but is just insanely good.
Like it's the same thing if you do an open casting call. It's like similar to like you know, the film world or like whatever. Like Tabletop Tempest, our friends over there, specifically did a casting call out for people who are children of immigrants or like or have experience, you know, with being like immigrants to some level or whatever. And the entire cast for each 3 of the games that are going to be featured on the Tabletop Tempest are all people who have experience with immigration, are first or second immigrants, or like undocumented, or you know, have experience with that or something along those lines. Like it's so, you know, right now our friend Kendo from Tales Yet Told is doing a project where they sometimes it's just like a casual ask of like, who's from the Midwest, like, you know, that sort of thing can really like what Fabian you were talking about, like it can really diversify slash just create like this camaraderie of like experiences that like can be actually very interesting and like continue the depth of like intentionality with storytelling.
Yeah, I was gonna say it kind of follows the same, like it's still the same intentionality all the way down the line, even as far down as like when you are putting out a casting call and even putting out feelers for what you're looking for. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that works at every level of the game industry, like with design as well. I mean, it would, you know, beyond casting, it's like just thinking about like the team you want to work with. There is that almost like you're bringing up like a kind of tension between all the cool people you could possibly work with and like what works with your lifestyle is like one axis, and then there's also just that like diversity or intentionality even versus just who do I know. And I say that as someone who fell into like, oh, I'm like working with people I know because they're cool and my friends, but like that isn't intentional, really. You know, it's like it's a little different the more intentional you get about the sorts of roles and who's really looking for the same sort of work cycle and like really producing art. I mean, at the end of the day, forgetting business, it's like who has that same vision of art. And the more you can articulate that, and that actually takes practice, I think. I wonder if y'all would agree to be able to articulate your vision. Like I was thinking the pitch decks you were saying, Fabian, like how do you describe the vibe for a creative project you haven't shown yet?
Exactly.
So some of us have day jobs or that we've been able to practice doing that, or have been writing kind of, you know, forever DM material for a long time.
Yeah.
But if you're new to this world, it's not rocket science. It's just the 10,000 hours thing of like, okay, like how do you know?
Or going back to what Joe said earlier, read, watch, consume media, because if you want to describe something, hey, I want this to be like John Wick meets this and meets that. And even without visual representation, everybody knows, oh, a switch clicks. And it's like, oh, I know what that's going to be. That's going to be cool.
You know, but also it's like it's that thing that where obviously nothing is a new idea, but also then to like be careful and be don't just play out the entirety of the movie that you want the show to
Exactly.
be. Like there's like a joke, like a running sort of thing of like this should be an audio drama or a book or something along those lines. Like
Yeah.
that's very much when storytelling goes awry and it's just like entirely on rails the entire time, or like whatever. Thinking about the medium, like does this need to be an AP,
Yeah.
is also something that we have to think about. Like
Exactly.
what makes this a game, like what makes
Yes.
this a whatever.
And I mean, maybe that's something we could talk in the future. Maybe we'll have to have y'all back on. Also talk about sort of adventure writing, quote unquote,
Mhm.
because I think as game designers, Chris and I have talked about that. We had a good chat with like, we were talking like Luke Gearing specifically about sci-fi stuff and some of the work we've done. It's like, how much do you tell which readers what material, how do you sort of
Mhm.
scaffold and how, no one at this day and age that I know of wants the thing to be completely on rails, but also there
Yeah.
is this expectation depending on
Right.
the kind of product you're selling. And I wonder if it's the same with the kind of AP you're doing. How formal is it? Businessy? Is it just, yeah, we don't really have anything
Everything's on
else?
rails.
Yeah,
Everything's on rails.
how on rails is it, and how
Yeah.
much can you disrupt that, or do you have to work to disrupt that? So maybe that is a little of a question. Do you find yourselves having to say like, oh, okay, this is all going like almost too well to hit the point we came up with 3 months ago when we started, but like you want that liveliness of chaos of improv. And I imagine there's some relationship management, maybe there's some personalities that like want to
Yeah.
take the story in a direction. They won't do what you want them to do. I don't know if like players everywhere. I don't know if you have any fun stories or no, because I mean I'm sure they're all lovely people and your friends, but anything where you've had to like work on that and figure out how to come back to the story or.
Uh, I mean, the reason why I said like everything is on rails is because like um most of the things are on rails for Bad House. Not because we want to control the story and the flow. It's more so we want to control how much time we take in each episode.
But also specifically they're on
Yeah.
rails based on what what the players also want to do. Like
Exactly.
we're asking everyone like this is like a big performance that we're
Yeah.
doing, and we want to showcase mechanics and things along the way, but also what do you want to do.
The players give us the tracks and we just lay it down basically as the rails.
Yeah.
I do want to go back real quick at advices APs. What last form of advice that I would say is you're going to make mistakes. You're going to do something really bad, and everybody does. And it's like from PAX weekend, one of our co panelists said something really beautiful that I really think that everybody should learn. John, I am not sure what channel they're on right now, but they said we don't really need a safe space in APs. What we need is a space where it holds people accountable. So when you make a mistake, just be accountable for it. You're bound to make them, and it's fine. You're not an evil person for making this mistake, especially if it's not intentional. You know, um, it's fine. But yes, please continue.
But my second to last question that I had in mind was just what are you working on? What can people expect? So new projects, anything you either want to plug, announce, or stuff you're currently working on. And I am also curious, in terms of game design, just in general, in the future, if you're gonna, in terms of the multimedia aspect, basically where you're putting your time in terms of AP versus kind of writing modules or working with designers. But yeah, again, however you want to take it, just what's new in 2025. We're almost at a new year.
So you want to talk about Slumber?
Yeah, so for Slumber, it is our first liminal horror story that we're doing with our friend Oleander Tripp, or Stray Nerd Boy. Um, this is our first very deadly game. So we have asked our cast of characters to create backup characters. The primary character and the backup character have some link to each other by whatever means, but we we're leaning into, again, like the horror story, the very dramatic movie and leaning into the theme of nightmares in the horrifying foggy city where everyone has fallen asleep and you have to then navigate their nightmares as well as your nightmares physically manifest. um, we can expect that unless anything happens in January 15th. There's not a formal premiere or like promo post out quite yet, but we're very excited to feature that very soon. I have like personal stuff that I can get into, but Fabian, if you want to get into more Bad House specific stuff first.
Okay. Yeah. So currently, Bad House is doing um, 2 shows right now. One is our Cobalt Creates story. Unfortunately, because of like the holidays and scheduling, it has been staggered. But normally we do it on Thursdays. We should have a new episode out. Third episode out is coming this Thursday, I believe. And it is using Tales of the Valiant, which is Cobalt Press's I guess reaction to the one D&D thing a few last year. It's a wonderful story in a Asian post-colonial country, very political drama. We utilize Castles and Crowns, which is their recently kickstarted product. A very interesting way to do a very House of Dragons, Game of Thrones style game. If you're interested, you can always check out Kobold Press for more of their content. Interesting game, wonderful if you're a big fan of 5e and you're not sure how you feel about 2020 D&D 2024. It is a really good alternative. They reworked a bunch of the classes, so you might want to check out their subclasses. And if you're still on 5e, you could probably port over some of the rules that they have. Wonderful rule system. They have a stellar team of designers over there. And one of our biggest projects is Midnight Rush. Like I mentioned earlier, it is a Hunter of the Reckoning game set in Darkness Eternal about 4 gig economy workers who are thrust into the world of hunters and now vampires and the other things that bump in the night in New York City. And you can check that out. Right now, we are on our season break. We will be returning back sometime in early 2025. We have 2 episodes that are in the chamber. We want to get 2 more before we start releasing again, but we should be back early next year. And as for something that we are designing for Bad House, we are designing a cyberpunk game that should be coming out, or you should be hearing about next year, which will be co-designed by Tales Yet Told showrunner Kendo Smith. And yeah, it should be a fun change from the cyberpunk red cyborg Shadowrun game that you are familiar with. It has to do a lot with choice, player choice, and skill trees. And I feel we were able to nail one of the more interesting ways to deal with hacking in a cyberpunk setting. So yeah, exactly.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to that. Huge. Actually, I think I was just saying to wife while we were at PAX. I was saying this to somebody while we were at PAX. Is like I'm so sick of the cyberpunk genre. I love it. I love it to death. I love cyberpunk, biopunk, all of it. But I'm also just so tired. I'm so tired of. Spicy. I think specifically American cyberpunk, where it's it's like the William Gibson. Yeah. It's been like
exactly.
And Art Talsorian, we're buds. We love them. Love cyberpunk, whatever. But like, I like that there's a sea change. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's why that's a lot of the work we do in terms of messing with genre is specifically because cyberpunk in the 70s was looking ahead at a kind of dystopia that we just now live in. It is just normal. So you have to look at biopunk and especially, hopefully the recuperative, revolutionary moment of solarpunk, which obviously is to come in our IRL timeline so far. But you have to keep looking ahead and ahead and ahead. And so I think with the intersection of climate fiction, merging all those things into solarpunk just makes sense, right? Like even if you live in the corporate dystopia, well, now it's a corporate dystopia, but drowning and doing climate wars. So it's just a little preview of like some of the things we talk about here on Why We Roll. Fabian, that all sounds great. And Josephine, that all sounds great.
And last thing, we are also hoping to extend our storytelling to a different medium. Hopefully, we're also going to announce a comic that is tied into Darkness Eternal by next year
sick.
as well. But yes, Josephine, you have other projects outside of Bad House as well that are wonderful.
Yes, I almost completely forgot about. Working closely with the designer of a game called Godling by Skylar Swift on itch.io. It is a currently pay what you can game. Obviously, always recommend throwing a little bit of whatever you're able to. Godling is a story about, as a TTRPG 2-player, where you play a godling, a baby god, whatever that may mean in terms of monstrous or man, as well as the caretaker to this godling. So I am going to be creating at some point in 2025 a sort of series of one-shot games where me and like another performer are going to play the godling or the caretaker, and the first episode ideally is going to be with the designer, where we can also just talk about like the things that came into it. Again, like it's funny to say it and it has not happened yet, but this is like the thing, harkening back to all of my intimate horror sort of things, is the intimate horror of like the relationship between a child who is ever growing and is becoming the religious pinnacle of a civilization, as well as just being a mortal caretaker to this thing as you grow older and less able. So the sort of family horror that comes alongside this type of dynamic inherently, and like what do you do and how genre hoppy we get out of it is going to be something that is going to be very fun. So definitely recommend, again, Godling by Skylar Swift. It's going to be wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I've not heard of that one. I'll have to check it out. That sounds very fun. Where can people find both of you individually? Where can people find Bad House and all of the amazing projects that you are working on?
So you can find us over at Blue Sky if you want our announcements. Bad House RPG, Blue Sky Social, and if you want to check out our VODs, best way to do that is through YouTube. So youtube.com/@badhouserpg. Make sure that you subscribe. Subscriptions really help YouTube channels with monetization. Help us get Google's money. But yeah, you can find us there, and normally on Twitch at twitch.tv/badhouserpg, where we go live. So if you check us out on Blue Sky, you can check our schedule out after the holidays.
And where can they find you, Fabian?
You can find me at Rockets and Pens, both on Blue Sky and every single other platform out there. Mostly on Blue Sky right now. It's a wonderful platform that is very interesting. Interesting community. So you can check me out over there.
And I have been Josephine. I'm at Scary Dog Friend on my own personal projects and other things. I know. I'm also on Blue Sky, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, whatever else you find me on. I'm probably not on it, but yeah, you can catch me doing some fun stuff. Also with my podcast called Monster Fuckers Anonymous, which is currently also on a seasonal break. But we do some charity streams every now and then, and we play video games, and it's fun.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that sounds fun.
Yeah,
all
great
good names.
titles.
Very good names.
I know.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. And this has been Why We Roll from the Stillfleet Studio. And thank you for listening. Have a good night.
Thanks for listening to Why We Roll.
Our theme music is by the brilliant Sam Tyndall and Arpline.
If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You can find us on all social media at Stillfleet. You can find out more about Danse Macabre, Stillfleet, and all of our games over at stillfleet.com.
Every hero strikes out on their adventure for a different reason.
To prove myself worthy of my mother's praise.
To write my own story and discover who I really am.
To prove to my family that I am more than they believe me to be.
To revive the god that has chosen me.
But when the fragile balance of the world is in jeopardy, and sinister forces move in the darkness, heroes will be tested, pushed to their limits and beyond. And it will be left to them to determine if they are up to the task. There is a darkness rising. Will they be able to overcome the challenges and meet this evil head-on?
For my god.
For my story.
For my freedom.
For the world.
To restore the balance. Modified Role Season 2, The Chronicles of Erin, a D&D 5e actual play podcast. New season, new characters, new story. Find us on all the usual podcasting apps or at modifiedrole.com.